Hi, this is my review of Gamemastering Secrets 2nd edition. Gamemastering Secrets is a compilation of advice, tips, essays on game mastering. The first part of the book is all done by Aaron Rosenberg, and the second part of the book contains different thoughts and opinions and advice of different authors, many of them game designers. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. Well, the quality in general is pretty good. Everything is well organized and written and explained. The document is fully bookmarked. And the design overall is somewhat minimalistic. You do have some illustrations here and there. Mostly they are comic strips of the Dork Tower. If you are not familiar with the Dork Tower, you need to read that comic strip. It's one of the best parodies of RPGs and gaming in general. I'm going to put a link in the description below of this video so you can go to that website and read the strips. And all of those comics better help to illustrate the different points and subjects throughout the different sections of the book. Now, I did find a few typos, but they aren't a big deal. You won't have any problems understanding the material here. Let's talk about the content. First, you have an introduction to what this book is and how you can use it and how it will help you to become a better game master. Obviously, this is a book to help you in your path to run a better game. And then you have some quick tips. So for example, it says, "You are God." That is, the game master has complete control over his game. It also gives some other tips like don't cuddle characters, although I find this a bit contradictory based on some other things that I read further on in the book. You also have some other tips like be flexible, NPCs are secondary, have fun, etc. And all of these tips are further elaborated upon. That is, each quick tip has its own paragraph. And then you have some advice as to how to handle things before the game, from basic terms and genre, that is, choosing the right genre or subgenre for the type of game that you want to play. You have all the tips for that right here. It goes into great detail in some subgenres and the differences between, for example, high fantasy and low fantasy, although it doesn't cover all the genres and all the subgenres, of course, but it's quite easy to take the tips and information here and use it in any subgenre that you want to run in a particular game. And then it gives you tips on how to choose a game system. This book is mostly focused on D20 and Fudge, but that doesn't mean that its scope is limited to those systems. That is, the tips here are quite universal, so it doesn't contain any like system-specific information. This book is useful with any RPG system of your choice. So it tells you how some systems are better at portraying or expressing certain themes and stories. It tells you how to read RPG books, and this is going to be of great help. For example, maybe somebody started playing RPGs with a very rules light and cinematic system, and if you ever wanted to like tackle a crunchier system or more on the simulationist side of things, you have all the tips and advice to do that and how to approach that thick book or volume. And then it gives you tips on how to change the rules and when to change the rules. When it's okay to leave them just like that, as long as it's helping you run the type of story that you want to communicate. And then it tells you tips on when rules don't apply, working without a net. So here you have a lot of information on how to improvise things and how to go with the flow and run a smooth game. It also tells you some information and tips on how to select the right setting for the right story, of course, and how to handle things that you have purchased in a store, that is pre-designed modules, or when you want to design your own adventures and campaigns, and how to homebrew things with all of the pros and cons of the different paths, so to speak. It also gives you tips on how to gather your players, set a time and place, how to design an adventure based around a specific group or type of player, how to further tailor encounters and events, how to bring in new gamers, and how to handle situations when a player can no longer play because his or her life just became too busy and such. So I think game masters in general are going to have a lot of fun reading this book, because as game masters we always not only we like to improve our art, we also like to see the thoughts and anecdotes of other game masters and how we can use those experiences to fine-tune certain aspects of the way we run things. And then we have information on how to start a game, like assembling the characters, creating that backstory for the party of adventurers, and how to set the tone. And it applies to, as I was telling you, to any type of context, to any time and place, even if you're running like a modern or even science fiction game or a fantasy game. All of that, all of the information here is going to be quite useful for that. And it tells you how to better foster party unity without it being like it feels too forced, and the differences between authority and interaction, and how to keep the adventure going and flowing. It also talks about daily preparation, keeping notes, and narrative styles, many important considerations before you start running an adventure or an entire campaign, because that specific adventure or campaign could reach a certain like an obstacle if suddenly that particular genre or even system simply does not support the type of adventures that you want to have. And then you have information on dialogue and dialect, and how to use props, different types of props such as audio aids as well. It goes into a lot of details at times. In other sections it goes a bit more on the general side of things, but it really does a good job tackling the finer points of each of those sections. And then you have how to handle hunger pangs, and when to eat, or before or after the game, or during the game if it's like a light snack. It also gives you tips on combat and handling numbers and narrative, so that the rules don't become an obstacle but rather a useful tool to run a particular encounter. It goes into details on, for example, in zombies and ghosts. Sometimes, let me read this paragraph. As I mentioned earlier, your games have lives of their own, and sometimes they just cannot make it to a session. Gamers, sorry. That's understandable. And as long as it isn't a constant thing, you shouldn't get mad about it. But it does lead to an important question. What do you do with the characters when they're not around? So everything about when a player simply cannot make it to a session, and you handle that particular character or hero as a non-player character, or you have some other person in the group handling that character momentarily. It handles all of that. And then you have tips on how to keep track of your game as the campaign goes on, and you need to keep a certain level of coherency or realism within the game world. And now there are some sections that I really dislike, like for example, here is one, fudging results. There are different sections in this part of the book by Aaron Rosenberg where he expresses a particular style of game as if it's the norm. That is, instead of telling you this is a way of running things, of this is a way of handling things, it goes like, you should never, or this is how, you should do it like this, you must do it, don't do it. And it feels because that's his particular style of running things, and I think it takes quite a bit of the important objectivity that is needed for this book to be a useful tool. So for example, in fudging results, I feel like he cuddles the player too much, and as I was telling you, it contradicts the quick tip at the beginning that it says don't cuddle the players. But here there are different parts of this, like in the holding them together section, and I think in the split focus, I'm not sure, I think not that one, but there are many sections in which he's basically telling you many ways in which the players must not be, the party of adventurers must not be eradicated or eliminated. So I feel that takes quite a bit from the risk and the fun of the game. I'm going to put a link in the description below to a video that I did some time ago where I talk about character death and all the benefits of character death. But here I feel like he cuddles or pampers the players a bit too much, And that really takes a bit of the realism within the fictional context, in my opinion, of, oh, don't kill that player, don't kill them. Then we have information on the sites on how to take a character, a player to the side, and giving him or her some important information, or if you want to handle this through notes. And then you have how some interests of personal or party interest could clash and make it a bit of an obstacle to running the game. It talks about how to handle power levels as well, because maybe your characters are becoming too powerful, and it gives you some tips on how to give out experience points adequately depending on your game. How to add new characters, that is not new players, when a character dies and you need to create one on the fly, when it's appropriate to just bring a new fresh character, or just use like a pre-generated character, or a character with a few levels of experience and such. And then you have information how to modify existing characters, and of course how to kill characters. Again, at times I feel he goes a bit too soft on player characters. Basically, all of this section of the killing characters is just there to punish the most stupid player characters, and not someone that simply got into a dangerous situation and tough luck, he got attacked and killed. But here in the section of killing characters, again, it feels like he's trying to avoid a total party kill at all costs. And then you have information on cheating. Again, it feels a bit more like coddling or pampering, like, oh, the game master can cheat whenever he likes, and in fact you should cheat all the time. If you don't cheat, you're doing it wrong. It has that type of attitude. He doesn't give it like that literally, but he gives that way. Like, sometimes he actually does say like, you shouldn't, or things like that. So I think he should be a bit more flexible, because there are many different ways to run a game. And then you have information on how to take people out and player satisfaction, because those are troublesome situations that sometimes happen throughout our RPG career. And then you have information on game master satisfaction, how to leave things open, like a bit more flexibility, either if it's related to the plot of a campaign or the way you are running things. And then you have the second part of the book of Secrets from the Masters, and this is different advice and opinions and essays on different, as I was telling you, authors. Many of them are somewhat famous within the RPG community. So for example, we have Genre and Setting Simulation, Perils, Pitfalls and Possibilities by Stephen S. Long. So here Stephen goes into further detail into how to combine the right setting with the right genre and all of the things related to rules and theme. This is actually a really good essay, in my opinion. And then you have The Joy of Research by Kenneth Haidt. And this is also one of my favorite parts of the book. It basically encourages you to research as much as you can related to the themes and characters and objects that you're going to be using in your RPG, because even if you're running a completely fictional setting, that reality base or foundation is going to do a lot to give realism and coherency to the entire game. And then you have Fiendishly Good, Creating Memorable Villains by John R. Python Jr. This section is also really good if you have problems trying to create a memorable villain or a quite charismatic enemy. This is a great section for that, or just a believable enemy, or perhaps even monster that is handling motivations and the force behind that enemy's actions, and how not to create those cookie cutter type of villains. He also goes into further details on how to have that villain pestering the characters throughout the entire campaign without getting that villain killed, because sometimes we want to have this really awesome bad guy and then the characters kill him right away when we just wanted the bad guy to come out and attack them for a bit and escape. But here they go into detail on how to avoid that. And then you have the section Here Be Dragons, The Science and Art of Map Making by Anne Dupois. This is a great section as well. Any type of map that you can imagine, of the universe, or of cities, or of dungeons and forests. You have tips for that here, and it points you into the right direction to get to the sources that will help you better flesh out those maps. And then you have Campaign World Building, One Step at a Time by James M. Ward of the Metamorphosis Alpha fame, of course. And this is also an excellent section giving you some tips on how to avoid troublesome situations. And one of the best parts, in my opinion, of this particular essay is that he tells you step by step how to create like a complete world, starting from a very simple town and going on to adventure sites and branching out. A really good section. And then you have the Game Master's Flowchart 101 by Mark Simmons, and this is basically a way to organize things with points such as, it says, by now you'll have a good idea of how the characters fit together. Note any inconsistencies to solve for yourself later. That is, if the party of adventurers makes almost no sense, you really have to keep in mind of how to keep things together, tied up to the story. And it gives other tips such as remember to keep it simple and arrange locations in the order that the players might uncover them, leaving space between each entry. So if you like, for example, to design sandbox type of campaigns, some of the points here will help you better organize things. And then you have a section called Character Creation by Ross Wynn, and this is basically like the section where you create villains, but for the player characters, to create believable player characters if that is your intention, or to how to tie things together so that particular personality in the world makes sense within that setting. And then you have Harems and Harpies, Women at the Gaming Table by Hilary Doda. And this is all about how to introduce women into gaming, although this section feels more like rather than just introducing to RPGs, it feels like you take a complete newbie, a woman who has never played almost anything in her life, and this is the section to introduce her to the hobby. So it does a pretty good job at that, although I feel it's quite a bit more specific, because, for example, maybe you want to introduce, let's say, a woman who plays video games, and you want to introduce her to RPGs. I think the transition is going to be quite easy within the normal situation, as you expect of social conventions. But here in Harems and Harpies, I feel it's more specific for someone who has almost never played a game at all. And then you have a section called The Beginner's Game, How to Attract and Keep New RPG Players by John Nephew. And that's pretty much it. However, this section, I didn't like it. No, didn't like it at all. Because basically it tells you that to attract players, you need to, again, to pamper them completely, to give them all of the cool powers, to avoid killing them at all costs. That is, if the character acts all stupid and does so many crazy things, basically gives you many different ways or loopholes to avoid killing that player, that newbie. There is like a small section like, oh, well, if it does something really, really stupid and kill that character, but most of the chapter is all about, do you want to keep players at your game? Give them everything, give them the world, give them everything in a silver platter, and this is it's a bit ridiculous, this particular section, in my opinion. Because being a gamer, that is my RPG beginnings, as many of you know from my introduction to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons box set, I started playing Dungeons & Dragons with a total party kill in a very lethal encounter, and that didn't discourage me from keeping on with the hobby, keep on playing. And here they basically tell you, if you bring a new player and his character gets killed, he will never play again. And so I didn't like this section at all. And then you have NPCs, Not Paper Cutouts by Lee Gold. And this is a great section. It feels like a companion to the other essays that tell you how to create villains and heroes. Here you have information on how to create non-player characters to serve as allies or antagonists, or as henchmen, or even victims to be rescued or avenged. A really good section overall. If you don't like having, again, cookie cutter type of personalities in your game, this is a good section for that, to avoid doing that. And then you have Winging It, The Fine Art of Making It Up as You Go Alone by Jean Rab. And this is all about improvisation, although this section I have mixed feelings about it because some of the tips here are good, but some others it feels like you have to go along with everything. That is, if you're playing, let's say, a science fiction game, and suddenly one of your players says something like, "Oh, I get it. This base belongs to killer clowns. This base in outer space," and it basically tells you, "Oh, go along with that idea." And I think that's a bit of immaturity to the game, because that way anything that the players are going to be thinking, they are never wrong. They're always right, and they have noticed some clue, no matter how crazy that clue looks like. Oh, because the player says so, it's probably there. So if the player goes like, maybe you're playing the Wild West though, and you say, "Oh, that cave belongs to some intelligent talking bears," and suddenly you have talking bears in this Wild West RPG. So it doesn't go too explicitly in that way, but it feels like that, like constantly catering to the desires of the players. And then you have the section Throw Them to the Wolves. And this is a really good section to give you tips on how to take characters out of their safety zones. Maybe they want to go to town or a city, and just put them in a really dangerous situations with no hope of obtaining healing potions and resurrections, etc. Even though it's more focused on the fantasy side of things, it's quite easy for you to take the information here and apply it to any type of setting. And then you have a section called Trust at the Gaming Table by Frank Mentzer. So this is all about the cooperative experience of playing an RPG, because there needs to be trust between players and game masters, and it goes into much detail into how to grab the ideas of the players and the ideas of the game master and find harmony between the two, even in the most conflicted situations. And then you have Treasure by Stephen Marsh. This is one of my favorite sections. It goes on about how to reward player characters, not just through gold and magic items, but also through titles and properties and land, or perhaps planets in the case of science fiction. So it's all about how to reward players and how to avoid those situations in which you have given them too much gold and they are basically buying all the most powerful magic items or high technology weapons. It's all about keeping balance in the campaign, but at the same time helping your players feel rewarded for their actions and for the risks that they take. And then you have Campaign Troubleshooting, and this is a great section on how to handle those, for example, dry seasons where you have no players at all, because sometimes the environment or panorama simply is not suited to play RPGs, and so you have to wait for the right season. And then it gives you some tips on how to handle campaigns when you actually get the campaign going, how to keep it going, keep it alive, and to recognize those good and bad seasons to play RPGs. And then you have Running a Con Game by Matt Forbeck. So this is all about running a game at a convention, and it tells you how to be a bit like a con artist in a way when improvising things and such. That is why it's Running a Con Game. So it gives you tips on how to get involved, how to sign up early. If you're ever running a game in one of those really crowded conventions, this section gives some great tips on how to do that. It gives you some specific details on how to keep it short, keep it simple, on how to, for example, not running out of time, because maybe you only have like 3 or 4 hours to run a game, and it tells you, oh, you need to finish this encounter. If you notice that it lasted a bit more than you expected, you need to consider ending things 15 minutes before the appointed time. So it's all about that. Many good things on how to handle the crowd and running modules in public at a convention. And then you have Game Mastering for Kids. Now, in general, this is a good section, in my opinion. because it helps you avoid problematic situations with children. However, at times I also feel like it pampers children a lot. That is, oh, if it almost tells you like children should always win, and if they do something good, they should be rewarded for that, and if they do something bad, they must be kind of like punished for that. And try not to kill too many enemies, because children could go crazy because with all the deaths and such. But this section feels a bit an exaggeration. Undoubtedly, this works better with those that are a bit, what would you say, sheltered or cuddled in their mindset. But I think it could do a bit of a disservice because it takes RPGs away from reality a bit too much. Because, for example, when it tells you when a kid does something good in the game, he should be rewarded for that, and that's going to give that kid perhaps a false sense of how life is, because in life sometimes you do good things and you're not rewarded for that, or vice versa. Sometimes people do bad things and they are actually rewarded for that. So I think rather it would be better to point out the message that even though you saved the kingdom from the evil dragon, the villagers chased you out because your character used magic against the dragon, and I think that would give the kid a better sense of personal honor. That even though he gets attacked by the villagers, he knows that the dragon was a menace for perhaps the entire world in the campaign, and he did the right thing. Although probably knowing players, they will probably get even on the villagers later on. Maybe if you're running like a sword and sorcery type of game, you could probably do that. And that part of, oh, don't kill too many monsters or bad guys because the kids are going to think killing is good. I don't think kids in general think that killing is good when they kill bad guys in games, because I think they are aware, or at least those that are a bit more sane are aware that they kill bad guys because they are bad guys, because those bad guys are killing and torturing and doing all of that. Or of course you won't put torturing in a kid's game, but maybe you could say that they're doing bad things. The orcs and goblins or bandits and assassins are doing bad things to people, so they need to be punished. It's justice. So I think that this section again pampers or puts the kids in a safety bubble that could end up harming them in long term, in my opinion. And at the end you have the biographies of different contributors of this section. You have an index and even a section of notes for you to write on, perhaps during a session or however you want to use that, those blank pages. So overall, let me tell you what I think of Gamemastering Secrets 2nd edition. I think this is a good book, but it could have been better. Because, for example, I compared it to the Game Mastery Guide of Paizo for Pathfinder, and that book is pretty amazing. It handles things so objective. It does get a bit subjective at times, but for the most part it keeps an objectivity that enhances the usefulness of it. But here with Game Mastering Secrets, in the first section I think it will only be useful for not for beginner players, or even for that is not for beginner game masters or advanced game masters, but rather those at the intermediate level. That is, maybe you have been playing role-playing games for perhaps 6 months or a year. That's the sweet spot, the place where a player is going to get more benefit from this first section of the book, because that particular section by the author Aaron Rosenberg, it doesn't go too much into details when it should. It does go further into things in some sections, but sometimes I felt he could have explained a bit more on that, or elaborated more upon that particular point. And at times again it cuddles that it encourages cuddling and pampering the players too much, and it tells you like that's how things should be. And no, that's not. Talk with someone who plays Lamentations of the Flame Princess or Labyrinth Lord or any type of gritty game that you can think of, or Savage Worlds using the grittiest setting, and that's not how things should be, or rather that's just one way in which things can go, or can the way that you can run things, and that's not made explicit in that particular first section of the book. So someone who has just started playing RPGs, maybe has only played RPGs for a few weeks or a month, and he starts reading that section, he's going to think that that particular school of running RPGs is like the norm. And no, it's not. There are many ways to run games. So that first section of the book, definitely for intermediate game masters. And the second section, with all of the different essays and opinions and advice of the different authors, I think this part is for advanced game masters. Because there are some things that I found really useful, but some others I already knew, but for the most part, all of the different tips and advice on how to handle specific situations, I think they are quite useful even if you are an experienced game master. However, as I told you, there are some sections where they simply coddle player characters too much, and that again of the how to run things for the kids, they're basically turning kids into Care Bears. And as I was telling you, reality is reality, and if you tell someone like, oh, you should never react or violently when protecting yourself, or you should never, or if you do good things you will be rewarded and bad things you will be punished, I think that's a bit of a poor job, and that's just my opinion, but I think it's a poor job to protect kids from reality. But that's just my personal take on it. So overall, Gamemastering Secrets 2nd edition, I only recommend it fully to intermediate game masters. But if you are a beginner, no, I wouldn't recommend this. I would recommend that you keep running things and learning on experience, or read some other books. I can't think of one that is specific. Maybe the Referee Guide for Lamentations of a Flame Princess by James Raji, but just keeping in mind the theme that it's for gritty and weird horror type of games, but there are a lot of cool tips on how to get a game started there. But as I was telling you, for the most part this contains intermediate material, except for that last part, which contains some advanced or finer points of game mastering. So if you're an advanced game master, you should only get this book if you are okay in thinking that only the second section of the book is going to be quite useful. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.